Hey guys, what's going on? This is Panzer Dragon, and today I want to be doing a patch 5.9 rundown of the changes and give you my insight on what I think is going to happen, how these changes affect champions, and how well they would do in solo queue or the meta right now. And just kind of providing my insight, and hopefully you guys get some information out of it. Alright, so first up we're going to be talking a little bit about the new Ashe and her rework and how I feel about it because I actually played on it in the PvE. So let's go over some Ashe and her new skills. Alright, so let's go over Ashe. First of all, basic attack missile speed increased, attack speed growth stat decreased, I'm not sure why, and then critical strike damage multiplier is reduced to 1.1. So I think that has to do something with her new passive, which I'll be going over. And her new passive is basically her old Q, but you can now critically strike on targets who are slowed by frost shot, and to amplify this damage, you just get critical strike items like Infinity Edge and Phantom Dancer. So it's the same thing, but without the RNG. Also, since her basic attacks always critically strike, remember that one mastery that increases your attack speed by 5% and it stacks up to 3 times. That's going to be really interesting. So in lane, you automatically have 15% more attack speed. So I think this is a really interesting. It's going to be really interesting the way that works, and she might be pretty dominant in lane, maybe. Probably not. Alright, so next up is going to be Ashe's Q, which basically gives you 20 to 40% attack speed, unless you have focus stacks on enemies, which is given when you apply Frost Shot on the enemies, so use a volley or auto attack, whatever, and once you get those 5 stacks, you get a new basic auto attack animation, which basically shoots a flurry of arrows, which doesn't apply on hit effects, sadly. And basically what that does is it gives her basic auto attacks this amount of bonus 8 attack damage onto her auto attacks. So that's kind of interesting. And only look at these numbers. So if you did 100 damage, you would be doing 135 damage in total if you get the 5 stacks that are consumed and their Q. Alright, so let's go over volley. As you can see, mana cost is less and early level cooldowns of W is actually lowered. The one you're going to be seeing in the laning phase is probably the most is 12 seconds instead of 16 seconds, since now you're probably going to be maxing out Q for more damage and stuff, and the arrows that fired is increased to 9, and the missile width is actually increased too, and now arrows can hit the same enemy twice or whatever, but it doesn't imply more damage. It's just so like in lane, arrows don't randomly hit people and go through minions kind of thing. So it is a nerf, and yeah, it is a nerf. Alright, now let's talk about a little bit about her Hawkshot. Basically, the range on her E is global, and now it can store up to 2 charges, just like an ammo system on Vel'Koz's W, but now it has a higher cooldown, of course. And right here, this, no more passively generates gold. It's nothing because, honestly, you had it at level 1 for the majority of the game. If you had 200 CS at 25 minutes, then you lose 200 gold, so not that big of a deal. But the thing is that's really useful is you have now a global clairvoyance. Well, clairvoyance is already global, but you basically have clairvoyance in your kit, and it's actually better than clairvoyance because when you shoot that Hawkshot, you can see while it's flying people who are under the Hawkshot. So let's say you shoot at the enemy's purple red, and you can see where he starts or whatever. You can see also the people who might be roaming during that time if you path that Hawkshot correctly. So that's going to be really useful. Kind of like Kalissa's W. Actually, Kalissa's W is kind of not that useful because as a jungler, you can easily avoid those because you know the range of vision where it'll scream at you and spot you. So I don't think Kalissa's W is that useful, and it can give you a false sense. But this one, it's pretty good. So definitely, this is what's going to make her really good for competitive play. And as you can see on the ultimate, it is a nerf. It now applies Frost Shot's current value, so no more 50% slow, but it's not that big of a deal. And honestly, with all this changes, I think Ashe does get a buff. This Q is really useful, and the new passive, of course, critical strike, constantly gives you free attack speed because you have the frenzy mastery point. So even though her W and kind of her R got nerfed, everything else basically got buffed, so you're looking at a really strong champion in the bottom AD carry for sure, especially in competitive play. And in solo queue, I think she's gonna be really good, yeah, because she has this new Q and passive. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Akali. So you can see cooldown is going down on her E along with AP ratio going up, and now her ultimate now you appear behind the enemy. So that's pretty interesting, because her last nerf was a range nerf, but I think with this coming back in, or this buff, whatever, it's basically the same amount of range you can go to the enemy, but like obviously the distance has to be much more closer before using your R. So that's what I think this is gonna do. And as for E, I'm unsure about this one. I know like late game, or like once you get level 12, it is 1 second, so you can keep spamming your E, but of course there is energy usage, so I don't know how much you can spam it, and that's what I think maybe or might not affect, you know, like if this buff is going to be used for or not. But that's my opinion, because I don't play Akali that much. I don't know how much energy she actually uses, so yeah, we'll see. She might be viable in solo queue again. Alright, so Annie's attack range got nerfed by 50, and what does this mean? Honestly, I feel like in mid lane it doesn't mean that much, because her main harass tool is like Q. Maybe for like the first few levels, level 1 and 2, and then after that it doesn't really matter. But for the support, the bot lane is mainly consisted of auto attack harassing the enemies, so definitely at level 1 Annie isn't as impactful because she doesn't have 625 range. And so this is more of a support nerf than a mid lane nerf. And yeah, because of course she can't get her spell thief stacks off as often anymore, so it does hurt. And yeah, mid lane Annie is definitely more powerful than support for solo queue. Support wasn't even that great, it's decent, but like now I don't think a lot of people will be playing support Annie anymore. I think this is more towards competitive play than solo queue, of course. Next up, we're going to be talking about Hecarim. Alright, so Hecarim, as you can see, you now do full damage to monsters in the jungle. So it used to be 66% of the damage, but now it's 100%. So that's a big buff. I mean, that's going from two thirds to, you know, 3/3, which is 100%, right? So that's going to be really interesting. I'm definitely going to try out Hecarim in the jungle more because of this buff. And looking at the cost of mana, it does increase. So it looks like lane Hecarim is getting nerfed. Like, look at this. 20 mana, 32 mana at level 1. What is going on here? That's huge. And of course, at level 5, 32 and 40. That's 8 mana off. But 12 mana difference for 1 Q? Like, I'm not sure if we'll be seeing Hecarim top lane as much as we used to anymore, and maybe it'll be viable, but we'll just have to see. Next up is going to be Kalista, and right here, she no longer gains bonus distance when dashing backwards. Have you ever actually tried dashing forwards and then backwards? You can see there's a big difference when doing one of the two things, and honestly, this is a big nerf, especially in team fights when you're trying to kite back enemies who are trying to kill you. So, like, I think with this nerf, I think with this nerf right here, I don't know if she's going to be viable because of this. Like, I mean, she does have the Blade Rune King and Runon's buff, right? But like this, I just can't see it. Because this is a big nerf when you're trying to kite someone, for sure. But that's about it. We'll just have to see. Alright, next up we're going to be talking about Morgana, and as you can see, the damage on her W is decreased at the early levels, but it does, you know, scale better at the later levels. As you can see, 33, 32, blah blah blah, whatever. Anyways, what does this mean? It means that support Morgana is getting a nerf, more than so top and mid, because she's the only one who leaves it at level 1, and she starts maxing out Dark Binding, while top and mid Morgana usually max out W just for the wave clear. So it does hurt support Morgana a lot more than others, and that kind of sucks. But I don't even think Morgana is that big of a champion to, you know, to nerf. I feel like she's okay in her spot right now, so I'm not sure why they did this. Alright, so Nasus gets a bug fix, but let's talk a bit about Nocturne. So he gets 30 increased damage on his E at level 1, and at max rank he gets 10 more damage, which doesn't really matter. But this is actually incredibly huge for dueling, ganks, etc., even clearing the camps a bit. And he gets you know, fear factor, which works on his other people's fears, of course, so that's interesting. But anyways, yeah, talking about this 30 increased damage, incredibly strong for dueling, jungle and clearing once you have that blue buff, and that's basically it. And you know, Cinderhulk is actually getting nerfed in this patch. I'll talk about that a bit later, but since Nocturne got his ultimate cooldown a bit less on the earlier ranks, with this buff also, I actually think he might be a strong champion, and really, yeah, really strong in the jungle right now. Just is all speculation, of course, but I definitely think with the Cinderhulk nerf going down, he might be stronger than, say, someone like Vi. Maybe. Alright, next up, let's talk a little bit about Olaf. So as you can see, he now gets 50, 60, or 70% bonus movement speed when going towards enemies for 1 second when he activates his ultimate. This doesn't work when you're running away, only towards against enemies. So, you know, Olaf's problem is that he doesn't have a gap closer, but now with this, his R and his Q, I'm pretty sure he's going to be decently strong, and in the jungle he might have Righteous Glory plus this, so going onto those enemies and trying to initiate might be a thing for him. And you know, he was being used in the LCS I think by Reignover a lot, so with this buff coming in, he might be pretty good in the jungle. Cinderhulk did get a nerf, but yeah, I can see him being decent. I didn't like him before, and even when they were using him in the LCS, I didn't like him then. I feel like he was still too weak, but maybe this is the notch that might bring him in. For sure, someone is going to pick up him in LCS. For solo queue, I'm not too sure though. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Renekton. So right here, 50 more bonus range on his W, just like Mordekaiser's Q. They gave that to him too. And now the self-stun when he activates his W when it's empowered, it's now 0.5 seconds, so he can activate his Q faster and do more moves, which is pretty good. Same bug with his ultimate, like Nasus, it's fixed. So this, I can see it being more powerful, especially in team fights, because there is a delay where he has to, you know, do that triple W thing and then sweep his Q. So it's going to be pretty good. Of course, with the Black Cleaver coming in, he should be in a good spot, I think. Maybe he needs one more buff to make him like super viable or something in the top lane. He's viable right now, but maybe he needs to be more buff for super viable. Alright, next up is going to be Riven, and as you can see, movement speed is being decreased along with her wind slash, the missile speed, of course. So what does this mean? Well, Riven has a lot of mobility with her Q and E, so getting back to lane faster with that is like good. I don't think this means as much as, say, someone like Yasuo, who has to run back to lane with no mobility to get back there. But, you know, with Riven, I don't think this is as impactful, so that's good. This, of course, is not that impactful. I would say her ultimate range is a bit lowered because, let's say you shoot it out, there's more time for the enemy to move, so he can move like maybe 1 or 2 more steps or whatever, with this missile speed being decreased. So just a little less range on her R, I feel. Other than that, I still feel like she's going to be a really good champion. Alright, so next up, let's talk a little bit about Ryze. So as you can see, Clarity is fixed on his passive, E no longer procs Mana Immune and Rallies for single target stuff, and Desperate Power gets a bug fix, whatever. But let's talk a little bit about Ryze himself. So right now he's in a really bad spot. His Q is a skill shot. His range is higher though, but honestly, he's kind of like Vanguard. He needs the Vanguard treatment where they keep constantly buffing him until he's like somewhat viable. I feel like Vanguard is also viable right now, but I think maybe Vanguard needs one more buff or someone's going to use him, something like that. And that's what Ryze needs right now. He's right now in a terrible spot. He's got one of the lowest win rates for sure. And I know you guys have been saying people just have to figure him out. Well, how can you figure him out? Like Gnar top, people figured out that they had to build tank on him. Kalista, people figured out you had to build Runons on her, and yeah. What kind of secret builds we have to build on Ryze? Well, there's not really any. I think it's either mana, full tank, or AP, and I think everyone's tried that, so, and had no success with him still. So that's why I feel like he's a bad champion, because everyone knows how to play him already. Like, you just press Q, you know, do all this stuff. But right now, I don't think he's in a good spot. Next up is going to be Tristana. Her E, the bonus damage per stack is increased by 5%, so it's going to do 120% more damage instead of 100% once you get that E charged up. And now cast time is reduced by attack speed. I guess this helps for late game kind of thing. That's pretty interesting, but with this buff, it's, you know, very minor, so I don't think it's going to put her in the top 5 AD carries for sure. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Trundle. So as you can see, the slow is being increased by 5% on all levels, not a big deal. The knockback distance is a big deal. So as you can see, it's been increased by 1/3 or 1.3 of its original, the knockback distance when you shove that pillar up someone's arsenal. So that's actually really powerful, especially for ganks, because that is a huge range. And that's going to be really interesting. Of course, sometimes you might miss the knockback, so it might suck, but it does help a bit. I don't think it'll make him a meta champion at top lane though. Alright, next up, let's talk a little bit about Xin Zhao. So Xin Zhao, he received the buff in the last patch. I think his E does more damage. I think that was the buff. And now in this patch, his R is now applying a 0.75 second stun to knock back targets after they get knocked back, I think. So if you combine the knockback duration plus this stun, I think that comes up to like a 1 second stun in total. So that's very, very powerful, I think. And that will make him pretty good, in my opinion, because I've been seeing some people use Cinder Hulk on him already, get Black Cleaver, whatever, go super tanky and be a beast late game. And now with this coming in, I can definitely see him being really good. If you know, he wasn't already good. Alright, so Zed now has a 1 second cooldown before he can reactivate it to return back to where his original Deathmark Shadow was. And what does this mean? Honestly, I think it means more for juking and making big plays, especially for escaping, because that's the only time you would use it. So it doesn't hurt him too much, but in certain situations, he definitely now has a window where you can kill him. And that's basically it. Alright, so right here they're going to be nerfing the Cinder Hulk. It no longer ramps in damage and actually deals less base damage, but it does double damage to monsters. So that's kind of interesting, but let's actually see how much damage you lose at level 18 with the passive, right? So right here, you're looking at this number right here at level 18. 1.5 times 18 plus 24, that's 51 damage versus what we have here, so we go 0.6 times 18 plus 15, you're losing 25 damage when you're level 18. So that is a lot of damage you're going to be missing out, right? And you know, that could actually break the tank meta. However, they still do scale into the late game much better than the warrior, just because they have that bonus health. So it might not change a lot, but it does hurt them a lot. And since you don't have the Gromp passive anymore, like, you know, how much damage it used to do, they nerfed the Gromp, whatever. It's going to be, I feel, a bit harder for you to do damage. And they're also reducing, I'll talk about the Skirmisher Saber later, but let's see how much damage you would do previously from mid game. So let's say you're level 13 times 0.6 plus 15, you do 23 damage versus 1.5. Ooh, that's a lot of damage you're actually missing. So I guess you won't be doing that much damage in team fights, of course, but at least you still have the phenomenal clears from these tank junglers. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the Skirmisher Saber. So you can see the challenging smite debuff duration is being reduced to 4 seconds instead of 6 seconds. And of course, no longer reduces incoming true damage. But that is a bug fix, so it was bound to happen. What does this mean, honestly, again, for the tank meta, this is also another source of damage to be used on enemies, which was, you know, keep applying the true damage on enemies, smite them, whatever. So Nunu, he can't do as much damage as he could before. He was also a Skirmisher's user. Nautilus was also one of them too. I think Gragas, yeah, Gragas also allowed to attack their enemies. So again, less damage coming from the tank meta, and yeah, it's kind of making this tank meta fall a bit. And of course, top lane, some people were using like Shyvana in LCS. I don't think she was really that great for solo queue, of course, but yeah. It's just really interesting what these two nerfs are gonna what they're gonna do to the meta, and how maybe people are gonna go back to the warrior or something, or you know, bust out some AP champions or something like that. Surprised they haven't buffed Devour yet, because that item needs a buff. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about the Summoner's Rift Dragon. So attacks per second is being increased 0.5, base damage is being increased by 25, and then current percent health damage is being unchanged. So this hurts your early game dragoning. No more. Actually, you'll probably still be able to do level 3 Vi solo dragon thing, but still it'll hurt you more. And when contesting dragon, you probably don't want to start it when you're going into a 5v5, because the people who are going to start it probably will lose that team fight. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys for hearing my insight, what I think is going to happen. You know, a bunch of other stuff is happening. I guess you can read these bug fixes right here. But yeah, again, thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed my insight. I am Panzer Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.